All right.
And yeah, we are live, everyone. Welcome to the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. It is a sunny and starting to be beautiful morning in San Francisco, where I find myself today. And I'm joined on the show today by Ryan Kleps, who's coming to us from just outside of Seattle, Washington. Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Gabe. Hey, everyone.
Yay! So glad to have you, and so glad to have all of you who are joining us live on the show. If this is your first time on the Gamification Revolution, you're going to need to log into Spreecast with one of your social media accounts. And once you've done so, you'll have access to a whole bunch of stuff. You can chat with your fellow viewers. Hello, welcome back, all our regular viewers. You can chat with our regular viewers. You can also ask Ryan and I questions. And you can do that by clicking on one of the buttons that's somewhere on your screen. It says question or camera, and you can come on and actually ask us questions on camera, or ask us questions on text, and we will get to it in this action-packed 30 minutes that we have together. And if you're not with us live, but you're listening on the podcast or watching in a repeat video cast, thank you for joining us. For all of you, it's about time for Gamification Summit to be on your agenda, June 10th through the 13th in San Francisco. It's gsummit.com, and we're bringing together over 50 amazing speakers, including Ryan and myself, who'll be there talking about engagement. And also, for those of you who follow us may have heard that yesterday we announced the second of our major keynotes for the conference. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson from the show Cosmos and the Hayden Planetarium will be joining us, talking about how to make difficult subjects accessible and exciting to people, how to engage people in tough subjects. Because if you can do it with astrophysics, you can do it with anything. And we're going to hear from him on what the secrets are to get people engaged in topics that complicated. And also, of course, we announced Professor BJ Fogg from Stanford's Persuasion Lab, who'll be giving one-of-a-kind hands-on workshop on how to persuade people and design for engagement, as well as another keynote talking about how we engage people. That plus the amazing Ryan and everybody else. It's G Summit. You got to come to it if you're interested in engaging design. It's gsummit.com, and you can use the code GAMREV to save as a viewer of the show. Okay, so Ryan, Boeing is a company that everybody knows. We've all been on a Boeing plane at one time or another. I've flown my share of my 4 million miles or so that I've flown on Boeing jets all around the world. It's no surprise, technological leader, interested in subjects like gamification. Tell us about what it is and how it is that you use the principles of engagement in what you do at Boeing, and what it is that you do there.
Sure, Gabe. So my role in Boeing is within the IT department. So the group that I'm a part of is really our purpose for being is to help the software developers with the processes that they utilize to develop software, some of which goes on the airplane, but a lot of it, I would say the majority of it is in support areas. So typically the people that we're supporting are not developing the software that actually goes on the airplane, but they're working with support software. So our group is involved in creating, sustaining, developing processes to help the software developers who do software development and maintenance work at Boeing. And as part of that, we have, a few years ago, we developed a pretty traditional method of developing software. We rolled it out to IT department. People started using it. And then as they started using it, we started getting some feedback that maybe we needed a more agile approach as well to supplement the approach that had been rolled out. So myself and about half dozen of us got together. We put together an agile version of our standard software development process. We piloted it. We rolled that out. People started using it. And then I think that the primary way that I've been involved in gamification was through a training class that we put together to help train people in this new agile software development approach. And when we were putting the class together, um, I, I happened to be involved in something completely outside of my Boeing work, and that is I was teaching children's church at our church, and the curriculum that we were using, I think you would say it was gamified curriculum, because what would happen is you'd take the class, you'd split it into two parts, and you'd have this sort of friendly ongoing competition between the two sides of the class. So I thought, hey, what would happen if we tried something like that at Boeing? What if we took this class and we split it into two teams and we gamified it so that as people went through the material and completed exercises, it would just be a fun competition. So we tried that out and ended up using a football theme for the class. So in this class, we have two teams, the X's and the O's, and as they go through the exercises, answer questions, complete assignments, they get yardage for their team. So we've got this football field posted up on the wall with a little. In fact, I got the couple icons here. We've got the X and the O team here, and their little icons march down the field, and they score points, they gain yardage, and so forth. And it was really quite interesting and funny to see because we didn't really know what would happen when we tried this with adults. I knew it worked with kids, that they'd raise their hands, they'd get involved for getting points and stuff, but really had no idea what would happen when we tried it with adults. But what happened surprisingly was, to me at least, they really enjoyed it. They got into the
Now,
competition, and even something as nebulous as yardage would serve to motivate people when they're going through the exercises. So we time box things in these exercises, and I can recall on numerous occasions where people would say, "Hey, we've got to complete this exercise so we get yardage for it. We got to help our team." So it was really
oh,
very
really? So
interesting.
it became kind of part of the language that people were using internally to describe how they would proceed.
Right. Yes. So as they went through the exercises in the class, they were particularly aware of the fact that they wanted to complete the exercise so that they would be able to gain yardage for their team, and it really served to be something that was motivational.
So this is really interesting. So here in the chat, some of our regulars like Dutch and Seamus are talking about how, we're all kids at heart and getting kids to, getting people to play adults as kids. So you talked about a little bit of, I guess, some of your concern about whether you'd be able to translate that idea from children to adults in that particular context. Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about how you overcame that concern or how you helped people inside the organization, maybe your management team, overcome the concern that you were doing something maybe too childlike?
Well, it took a while for actually my management to even attend the class. I don't think my original manager even actually attended it, but he heard a lot about it apparently, and I think as far as convincing management that it was a reasonable approach to take was the surveys that we've gotten from the class have been outstanding. We consistently get very high ratings for the class. We get comments like, "Well, this is the best class I've taken in however many years at Boeing." So people really enjoy the class. We were wondering at one point too, is the theme going to actually detract from the class? Is it going to be a distraction and so forth? And I can see how it could be if you go too far. It could overwhelm the content of the class. And so that has actually taken some time. It's taken some tuning to really find that right mix. And I think we've got a very good a balance at this point in time.
Can
So
you talk a
things like
little
the
bit more
survey
about that?
results and so forth are really borne that out.
Can you talk a little bit more about that tuning? Like, talk about a little bit about the details of how exactly do you earn points and the yardage, and what are some of the tuning
Sure.
things that you really had to lean in on to get
Sure.
it to work?
Yeah, so early on we tried some things that we discovered. Yeah, we had an idea, tried it out, didn't really work that well, and so we ditched it in favor of something else. So we've been actually doing this class for over 5 years now. We've trained over 2,000 students in it, and we're getting close to our 100th class. So early on, we experimented with a number of things, and occasionally we'll do some experimentation even now. But we've got a pretty good idea of how to balance those aspects of the class. As far as the mechanics, the dynamics of the class, kind of the way it works is, as I said, we split the class into two parts. Usually there are even two parts within that half of the class. The students will we break the material into what are called pomodoros, 25-minute modules, followed by a 5-minute break. So we set up this cycle of 25 minutes followed by a 5-minute break with another 25-minute segment and so forth. That's another part of the class that people seem to really enjoy and appreciate. And then during those segments, if it's an instructional segment, at the end of a module, we'll have what we call a tip drill question. So we put a question up there related to the module. We look for the first person to raise their hand. If they get the answer right, they get 5 yards for their team. We move their little helmet down the field. During the exercises, we do something similar at the end of the exercise. They'll have a report out. If they successfully complete the exercise, they'll gain a base yardage component, usually 15, 20 yards, and then they'll have an optional random component. So we have these dice that are, we had them created especially for the class. They roll the dice. Depending on what they roll, they get additional bonus yards. You might be wondering what happens if they get a touchdown. Well, they get 6 points, right? It's a touchdown. But then what? Well, we wanted to also incorporate some elements of movement in the class. So we don't just have people sitting around the tables, although during the instructional modules that's usually what's happening. But when a touchdown is scored, each team has to fill certain roles. They need to fill a coach role, they need to fill a quarterback role, kicker, and holder. So when a touchdown is scored, well, we got to see if they make an extra point. So they'll get up out of their chairs. We've got this taped field on the floor, and the kicker and the holder work together to see if they can kick an extra point, basically hitting a target that we have on the wall. We use Nerf footballs, so usually nothing gets damaged, but it gets people moving, and it's really an engaging aspect of the class too, because everybody's watching to see are they going to be able to do it and so forth, and it's just a fun aspect of the class.
So that kicking element is just pure fun. There's no, that's really just meant to get people move around a little bit and just pure fun. There's no
Right.
real business purpose to that, right?
No real business purpose. We do something similar at the end of the day too. So that's what happens kind of at every module. That's a routine that we'll follow through. At the end of the day, we do something called a 2-minute drill, which is essentially a series of these questions that we have at the end of each module, and they get 10 questions. They have up to 2 minutes to answer as many of those questions as they can during that time. And at the end, if they get through all the questions and they still have time on the clock or timeouts, then the quarterback gets a chance to throw at a target in the end zone. So we incorporate that part as well.
So it's very interesting. Now, what about the actual theme of doing football as the kind of theme of the sort of game that you're playing in the class? Have you guys experimented with other actual themes where, do you imagine that if you were to replicate this at other Boeing facilities, let's say in other places or with different groups of people, might you need to change the theme? Or do you think that football, is football kind of universal enough to work for everything?
It's fairly universal. Um, one comment that we'll get sometimes is, I came to this class, I wasn't really excited about the football theme, but afterwards I realized how it actually added to the class, and it was fun. It wasn't too footballish. There weren't people actually tackling each other and so forth. Uh, so you could almost think of it like sort of a board game, really, with the playing pieces of that game being people at different points in time. Because one of the things that we wanted to do was kind of merge the elements of knowledge gained during the class with kind of a micro reward of being able to do something in the class. So there's different types of rewards. One of those rewards is actually just having a break in the sort of the sequence, the cycle of the class, in getting up and having someone do something and watching them do that, whether they're actually participating or not. And so that part, I think, is pretty universal. We just happen to be using football as the theme for the class. Now we are trying, talking about different themes. We are um, launching a new class. We've had 3 versions of this class, which uses a cryptozoology hunt theme. And in this class, it's the same sort of thing that's happening there, really, in that we have a question at the end of each module. There's a series of questions at different points in time. But instead of playing football, what they're doing is they are earning money to buy clues, to purchase bait, to purchase some sort of capture device for these creatures, and then periodically we'll have what's called a hunt. And during the hunt, again, answer a question, you get a chance to try and capture the creature based on what you've learned about it through clues and so forth.
So, Ryan, it sounds like most of the things that you've done and that you're doing are pretty low tech, right? You're talking about Nerf balls and whiteboards
Yep.
and things up on the board. Can you talk a little bit about, we've had some other speakers in, Monica Cornetti here a few weeks ago talking about this low tech thing. You're in the IT department. Why are we using pen and paper and Nerf balls? What's the advantage of doing something low tech? And is software important, or will it be part of the future of teaching this way of going?
Yeah, well, the reason is I think that we just wanted to make it fun. We wanted to make it something that was simple as well. So in terms of the tools that we use in the class, it's pretty simple. Um, and there's all, I think also another component of what we were trying to do with the class, and that is people learn things in different ways. Some people are auditory learners, others are visual learners, even certain amount of tactile learning that people learn best with. And so we wanted to incorporate a number of different elements in the class. So we do visuals through things like PowerPoint. We've got large posters on the wall. Um, Auditory, of course, through the speakers. We wanted to have little manipulatives at the tables too. So sometimes people, it may look like they're distracted, but they can actually learn better if they have something to play with. So we have little footballs on the tables sometimes, or we also use flags. We use flags as a way of helping to keep the class on track. So flags, the way flags would be used is if you see a violation of our class rules, like more than one person talking at a time, or instructors, if we go too long, people will have their, we got one here, they have their flags, and if they see a violation, they throw the flag, and that again incorporates the kind of the management of the class with the theme. So we wanted to do something low tech because it's easy, right? And I know I would say, just in even getting involved in getting ready for this broadcast, you think things are simple. Lots of things can go wrong in
For
terms of,
sure, that's right.
when you get software and computers involved, there's certainly the potential to um, expand the amount of work that you can do, but also it can expand on those any glitches that happen. Those can be magnified as well. So
Can
we
we
went with
talk
a
about,
we went with a low tech approach.
yeah, do you imagine, given the success that you've had internally at Boeing, do you imagine what you're doing spreading to other groups beyond IT and beyond teaching agile principles, for example, and or becoming a software process? It must be really difficult in the IT side to resist turning this into a piece of software.
Yeah, we've had some people inquire. We've had some folks from the training organization come and attend the class to kind of see how we do things, and I know that there's been other interest as well. The other class that we're teaching, in fact, isn't an Agile class. So the Agile class generally, Agile emphasizes really a simple approach to things, saying you don't need tools. Really, all you just need are a whiteboard and some post-it notes. And so the going back to that question, your previous question, it kind of matches up with the approach that Agile uses, which is using very simple and low-tech tools, which we've now utilized for a long period of time and recognize that it really works pretty well. And so we've expanded it to the other class.
Do you find, back to the whole kind of limitation, giving people flags and kind of, highlighting, I guess, in some way bad behavior? Um, is there is the Boeing culture, so you can kind of give us a sense of what it's like to work at Boeing? Is the Boeing culture very comfortable with confrontation, or is it one of those sort of more rigid, not as communicative places? Because you're describing pretty cool, pretty fun ideas about how to approach and how to manage conflict or feedback in this sort of setting. And is Boeing the kind of place where you would expect this kind of innovation normally, or is it the kind of place where it's challenging to bring something like this to life?
Well, it's hard for me to speak for Boeing in general because I know I'm not really a Boeing spokesperson,
Sure.
but I would say this, that the other classes that I've been to within Boeing don't use this approach for the most part. I think that it's a good approach. I think that other sorts of classes could benefit from it, but I really haven't seen it. I've seen other classes that have things like creating skits and so forth, and using the simple sort of tools that we do in the class, but not a class that I've seen that kind of puts all these different pieces together. Um, and speaking of skits too, that's another thing that we've tried to incorporate as well. Some of the exercises involve, um, he said, modeling bad behavior. Uh, we used to do this skit that would be about, there are certain Agile and Scrum practices, and we said we're going to have you do a rookie skit going along with the football theme again, as part of that rookie skit. Show us that you understand how it's supposed to work by doing everything that you could possibly do wrong in that skit. And so that's just a way of getting another approach to showing what people have learned in the class by having a chance to perform, so to speak. And it's just been another way of helping to release people's creativity. And I think that's another real benefit of this approach. Um, when people are relaxed, when they're having fun, when they're playing games, it it frees you up to think about things that you might normally not think of, and you can come up with some creative and innovative solutions that way. So I think that's another benefit of this approach.
So your talk at G Summit, which very excited about, uses a word that I've only heard once before, and I'm going to completely butcher the pronunciation. It's Arbeitsglide, right? How do you say that word? Can you
Yeah,
explain to folks what
I
that
probably
actually
won't
means?
say it exactly right either, but Arbeitsglue.
Okay.
So it's Scandinavian. It's a Scandinavian term. It means joy in your work, and I think
And
that's one of the things that this class does. It brings joy to people.
is that important? And I know that this is a little bit self-serving because obviously we're interested in gamification. The people watching are, by and large, true believers in the idea of this. But put yourself in the shoes of, you work for a large engineering organization, one of the like world's most serious advanced engineering organizations. How do you convince people that the idea of joy, why is joy important? What does it matter if one of your skeptical colleagues said, hey, Ryan, why are you wasting your time with all this joy?
Yeah, I haven't had to do too much convincing really. When people take the class, they see the value in it. But that's not to say that everybody appreciates playing games. I can remember there was one individual one time that took the class that said essentially what you're saying. Ryan, we've got problems in this particular area, and why are we wasting our time playing these games and so forth? This individual left the class, but I noticed that they took all their materials with them. So I think they were even gaining some benefit from it. But going back to your other question about why is this important? What would you say? I think it goes back to what I was saying about fun. If you can put yourself in an environment that has less stress, you're going to be able to think better. You're going to think more clearly. You're going to come up with more innovative solutions to problems and so forth. So I believe that there's not only an emotional, personal benefit from having joy in your work, having some fun as you're taking a class and so forth, but ultimately it's going to help people with their solutions to even work problems, and it gives people the freedom to be more creative. This must be one of those times when you said it might happen, but you're not there. So you did ask me earlier though about the low tech versus other solutions, and as I was thinking about some of the things that I've done in Boeing, I've actually tried to incorporate this in other ways outside of just the class. So, for example, I do something similar to what you're doing, Gabe, in this sort of venue. with interviewing folks, we have something called an Agile support group meeting. And in the Agile support group, the name itself, I think, kind of lets people know that this is a different sort of a meeting. It's a meeting where people will come to that, and we just want people to talk. So we want people to share the practices, share the things that they're working on as they are working to implement Agile within their area. And I'm not calling it something like a community of practice. I'm not calling it, an Agile um, business meeting or something like that. But it's a support group where people who are implementing Agile or working to implement Agile have the freedom to say, hey, I've got this question about something, or this is something that I'm thinking about trying. What do other people think? And it just gives people the freedom to talk about those sorts of things in a less formal environment. As part of that, one of the ways that I've tried to gamify that is I've asked people to provide what they think are tips that other people could benefit from. We have a tip of the week sort of mini competition where whatever tips have been entered, have been submitted for that week, then participants near the end of the meeting are asked to vote on it. They select the tip of the week from the ones that have been submitted for that week. Those tips then move on to the next round to potentially become tip of the month. And finally, we vote on it at the end of the year. We've got generally 10 to 12 tips that have been tips of the month for a given year. That becomes the tip of the year. So it's sort of a gamified approach. We're in the middle of well, near the end of March Madness, really, with the Final Four. But that was kind of the idea. So you have one tip matched up against another tip, and they go head to head, and you figure out which one is the most popular, and that becomes the tip of the year. So I've done things like that as well, outside of the class, that are just intended to say, hey, we take our work seriously, but that doesn't mean we have to do everything in a totally business-like way. There are ways to make things fun as you're going through your work, and that's part of what I'm planning to talk about at the G
Well,
Summit.
I'm actually really excited to see that, and sorry that I've been away for a little while. I could see most of it and hear most of it, which was very interesting. Here's one question for you about Agile, particularly as we're talking about Agile, because we've been asked.
Mhm.
I've also been asked to work on kind of Agile projects. There's something about Agile that lends itself really well to gamification, and there's sort of like because we're trying to teach people, I think a process and the whole concept of sprints and stuff are more maybe more numeric or more more game-like in the sense that there's a beginning, a middle, and end, and we're constantly kind of doing that. What about in other processes? Like if you had to, start teaching other processes internally, do you think we could use these same methodologies to teach other dev processes? And can you talk a little bit about, about gamification of Agile in that way? Like, are they really good together?
Well, I think they are, and I think if you look at the principles behind the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Manifesto itself, it talks about emphasizing individuals and the collaboration that they have over some of the more formal things, the processes and documents and so forth that are typically emphasized in more traditional approaches. So I think that Agile just has this mindset of doing good high quality work and having fun while you're doing it, and recognizing that it's a collaboration. It's not an adversarial relationship between the business side and the IT side. I think that there is that just sort of underlying flavor throughout Agile. As far as other processes go, yeah, definitely. In fact, the other class that I was talking about is now about our traditional process, because people saw that we had this Agile training camp, and they said, "Hey, what can you do can we have a similar class for our traditional approach?" And so we've launched the 18S Base Camp. We call it ABC, a traditional class, and for that class, that's where we've utilized the cryptozoology hunt theme, and we just had three classes, so we're still working through some of the bugs, the issues, and so forth. But the last class, I was really starting to see how people were um, understanding the theme and getting into it. We had a situation where go ahead, you had a
No, no,
question.
I was just going to ask you actually. So if you if you had to give one piece of advice, the most hard one piece of advice that you've earned, the way that you've earned your stripes by doing this multiple times, you said you've done it like for 5 years at Boeing. If you had to give one piece of advice to other folks in your situation, people who need to get employees to take particular training, which might not be easy, or change a process or behavior or something, what would be that one sort of piece of advice that you really would want to pass on to them?
Hmm. Well, I think one of the things when you're trying to change behavior is if you can put individuals in a relaxed environment where they're not feeling as much stress, if they can laugh, for example, they are going to be more open to accepting whatever change you are promoting. And that's definitely something that you'll see in our class. You'll see people laughing, you'll see people having a good time. And and I think as a result, being more open to the material that we're presenting.
I think that's amazing. Get people to laugh, I think and it's great, right? People who do speeches have been doing that forever. Why can't that sort of fun and vibrancy be brought to experiences like training people and processes? Super, super excited to see your,
Exactly.
I'm super excited to see your talk at G Summit, Ryan, on gamification. Um, but we'll go with how to bring fun and joy into the workplace. Thanks so much for being with us today. Thank you for being here.
Hey, you're welcome, Gabe.
Uh,
Thank you.
Really, really cool stuff. And you guys, I know that you think it's cool, and you're going to want to come see Ryan talk about gamification and how they're applying it at Boeing and the other 50 or so folks who are speaking at G Summit, including Dr. BJ Fogg and Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, talking about the subject of gamification and difficult behavior change, June 10th through the 13th in San Francisco. It's gsummit.com. In the meantime, I'll be back with you next week for another couple of editions of the Gamification Revolution with more great guests and lots of talking about how we can use these techniques to change people's behavior. In the meantime, everyone, thanks for joining us this week on this edition of the Gamification Revolution. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. See you soon. Keep having fun, everyone. Thanks, Ryan. See you soon.
Bye.